There was arguably no better time to be an MTV viewer than the early to mid 2000s. By this point, the network had shifted away from playing music videos, instead pumping out hit TV series left and right. So it was only a matter of time before they licensed out some of their hit properties to video game developers, who gave fans the chance to finally interact with the characters from their favorite MTV shows. We'll be diving into 3 different MTV video games, from the good, to the bad, to the just plain ugly, on today's episode of Looking Back. The first MTV video game we're going to take a look at today is Celebrity Deathmatch, based on, well, Celebrity Deathmatch. Today, I'll be playing the PlayStation 2 version, but this game also came out on the original Xbox, PlayStation 1, and PC. Now, if you've never watched Celebrity Deathmatch, the show had a very simple premise. Take the basic concept of professional wrestling, but swap out professional wrestlers with popular entertainment personalities, and remove any and all real-world limitations by constructing clay versions of those individuals, and you've got Celebrity Deathmatch. Oh man, the show was so funny and creative, this game should be awesome. Yikes. No worries, there's still hope. I mean, a game based on Celebrity Deathmatch has to have an amazing character roster. Do you remember some of the celebrity appearances on that show? Now, granted, they were oftentimes played by voice actors who were doing impersonations of well-known celebrities. It was very rare that a celebrity actually provided a voice for their own character. But there was no shortage of voice acting talent on the show, so this character roster must be stacked. You know what though? I will give them credit. Every character in the game's roster made an appearance on Celebrity Deathmatch during its initial run. But the problem is, barely any of these celebrities were relevant by the time this game released. Like, in 2003, nobody cared about NSYNC or boy bands anymore. Everybody was sitting around cracking cans of DNL, listening to f***ing Linkin Park. But the character roster is the least of this game's problems. The gameplay is just brain dead. When I first started playing, I found that the game was just way too easy. So I cranked up the difficulty to the maximum level. Guess what? Still way too easy. You can literally sit there and mash the same button repeatedly over and over again, and you'll probably win the match. And to actually win a match, your opponent's health needs to be completely drained, at which point the word kill flashes in the corner of your screen, indicating that you're now allowed to perform your character's finishing move. Some of these are kind of cool. Mr. T calls in the A-Team van to crush his opponent, Dennis Rodman slam dunks his contender's head, and Tommy Lee plays guitar with his opponent's organs, which seems kind of weird as Tommy Lee is best known as the drummer for Motley Crue, until you remember that this game released during his weird nu metal phase. But sadly, those are, in my opinion at least, the best finishers in the game, which isn't saying much. You're now left with finishing moves such as Ron Jeremy summoning down 2 large disco balls, Jerry Springer sitting his opponent down on a talk show set and calling out a weird, I guess, demonic chicken to beat them up? What the f***? And from a graphics standpoint, the game completely missed the mark. The most appealing thing about Celebrity Deathmatch, other than watching well-known celebrities get the shit kicked out of them, was the incredible claymation art style, which can actually be implemented into video games in a really cool way. Just look at Clay Fighter or The Neverhood, for example. But instead, the developers just try to replicate the claymation style, and the end result is just a flat, boring mess. And don't even get me started on this game's sound design. The audio during the actual matches is just pitiful. Now listen, I haven't played every wrestling game under the sun, and I honestly haven't played a wrestling video game extensively since like the late 90s. The wrestling games that I played most were probably WCW vs NWO World Tour and WWF Warzone for the Nintendo 64. I remember those games having pretty good audio design for the time. The crowd would react to your actions in real time and would even yell out the names of the wrestlers who were currently in the ring. So why does Celebrity Deathmatch just use a single looping audio track for its crowd noise? The games that I just mentioned released over 5 years before this one. That is unacceptable. But to be fair, and I only discovered this after I recorded my gameplay footage for this video, Celebrity Deathmatch hit store shelves at a cost of $19.99. And for that price, it's still a shit game. But I can see the 2-player mode being pretty fun, if you can actually find someone willing to sit down and play this abomination of a game with you. I don't know about you, but when I think of MTV, specifically during the mid-2000s era, this next show always pops into my head, Pimp My Ride. This automotive makeover series hosted by the one and only Exhibit was immensely popular, not only in the United States, but around the world. I recently put out a video covering the history and legacy of Pimp My Ride, which I highly recommend you check out. I'll link that video in the description down below. But the Pimp My Ride name was quickly licensed out to video game developers, and thus, the world was gifted with Pimp My Ride. Wait a minute, we're not there yet. Pimp My Ride actually made an appearance in another even lesser known game during this era. About 1 year prior to the release of Pimp My Ride the video game, Midway Studios released LA Rush, which featured West Coast customs and all of the fan favorite mechanics and specialists from the first 3 seasons of Pimp My Ride, who even provided voiceovers in the game. But there was one glaring omission in LA Rush when it came to West Coast customs and the Pimp My Ride branding. Exhibit. He was nowhere to be found. Now, I don't know if he had a contractual obligation and wasn't allowed to be featured in the game, but it just feels wrong to see the Pimp My Ride logo being used in the game without the inclusion of Exhibit. But anyway, it seems like a lot of people slept on this game, myself included. I mean, were the executives at Midway huffing tanks of nitrous oxide? Like, why did they decide to release a brand new racing game in between 2 of the most highly anticipated arcade racing games of that year? And with that, LA Rush was left to rot in the EB Games bargain bin for the rest of its existence. And speaking of bargain bin games, we can finally talk about Pimp My Ride, which released for the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 2 in 2006, and eventually on the PlayStation Portable and Nintendo Wii in 2007 and 2008, respectively. As a fan of the Pimp My Ride TV show, a video game adaptation of it actually made a lot of sense at the time. But the problem is, the market was already flooded with racing games that leaned heavily into car customization. The goal of Pimp My Ride is to assist your fellow citizens of the aptly named Pimp City in, well, pimping their ride. But before you can do that, you need to drive around collecting cash by performing hilariously dated tasks and locating various collectibles. Something tells me that the development team at Technics had never actually watched a full episode of Pimp My Ride. Because, you know, my favorite part about every episode of Pimp My Ride was when the contestant would crash into other drivers to collect money, holla at random people on the sidewalk, and ghost ride their whip.
Oh, come on, man. Oh, shit, whoa, shit, dude, he's taking your car.
Once you've collected the requested amount of money, you're tasked with driving around Pimp City, racing to various part suppliers in a set time limit, outfitting the contestant's vehicle with parts that fit their lifestyle and hobbies. That portion of the game is fine, but the confusion hits when you get to the contestant vehicle reveal. Unlike the show, 2 different rides are revealed to the contestant. The one that you were tasked to pimp, and a rival body shop's vehicle. The contestant then has to pick between the 2. Now, I understand that they wanted to add a layer of challenge to the game, but this just seems really strange. As you pimp rides, you're given the ability to drive the contestant vehicles around Pimp City, which is kind of weird because, like, these aren't your cars. And from what I can tell, you aren't able to actually purchase a vehicle of your own and outfit it to your own personal taste, which would have been a really cool and appealing feature. But even if you could drive your own personal vehicle, Pimp City is just completely lifeless. I can only ghost ride the whip so many times before I get bored. And unlike Celebrity Deathmatch, this wasn't a budget title. Pimp My Ride retailed for $50 when it hit store shelves in 2006, which is just totally unacceptable. Like, it would be one thing if this game had an incredible amount of replay value, with an amazing selection of licensed vehicles, or licensed vehicles at all, and a killer soundtrack. But nope, Pimp My Ride fans were just forced to play a completely uninspired cash grab of a game. But don't worry, MTV wasn't done milking every last dollar from the Pimp My Ride franchise after this one, because Pimp My Ride Street Racing was released in 2009 for the PlayStation 2 and Nintendo DS. But we'll save that all-time classic for another video. I think I have just enough brain cells left to play the last game in today's video. And thankfully, it's a pretty good one, Jackass the Game. Released for PlayStation 2 and PlayStation Portable in 2007, with a Nintendo DS version launching in the early part of 2008. This game was released just over a year after Jackass No. 2 debuted in theaters, and only a few months after that movie was released on DVD. So clearly, the Jackass brand was more than relevant enough to carry a video game release. But none of that mattered, because Jackass the Game suffered from terrible launch timing, as the game was released just 1 day before Cabela's Trophy Bucks. Wait a minute, wrong game, sorry. What I meant to say is that Jackass the Game hit store shelves 1 day prior to the launch of Halo 3, a game that had an insane amount of fanfare and went on to sell nearly 15 million copies.
The wait is finally over.
From coast to coast, gamers lined up to get their hands on this little package, Halo 3. If the company's predictions are right, its first day sales could outdo not only the final Harry Potter book, but the debut of Spider-Man 3, which rang in at $150 million in its opening weekend.
But hey, does Halo 3 let you slide down a cactus-covered hill while wearing a cheetah print thong? No. Did Halo 3 have a game of tug-of-war set at a sewage treatment facility? Nope. Could you tattoo the Jackass logo onto Wee Man's back while he's sitting on a kiddie ride in Halo 3? Give me a break. Despite its simplicity, Jackass the game really captured the spirit of the Jackass movie and TV series. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that every member of the Jackass cast was brought in to do motion capture for their respective characters, and recorded voiceover lines as well. With exception to Bam Margera, who didn't make an appearance in the game due to contractual obligations with Activision. And Ryan Dunn did in fact record voiceover lines, but he didn't actually perform any motion capture, as he had fallen into a depressive episode after sustaining an injury on the set of Jackass number 2. But with all that out of the way, how is the actual game? On its own, decent at best. But when comparing it to Pimp My Ride or Celebrity Deathmatch, it's a damn masterpiece. In Jackass the game, Jeff Tremaine racks his nuts on a fire hydrant, which somehow results in a fractured fibula. Therefore, you, the player, are tasked with stepping into the director's chair to film the new season of Jackass. There are 7 episodes in total, which are comprised of 5 different stunts to complete. The stunts themselves are just mini-games. Some of the stunts, just like Jackass, are extremely stupid, but really enjoyable. But as you progress, the minigames really begin to feel repetitive. A lot of the concepts are reused or reworked throughout the game. Luckily, additional challenges were thrown into each stunt to keep things relatively fresh. As you progress through the game, you're rewarded with additional characters, along with outfits for those unlockable characters. In terms of the visuals, they're not really anything to write home about. But at least the cast members look pretty close to their real-world counterparts. And I like that their dumbass faces are constantly shown in the bottom corner of the screen. But I will say that the sound design is probably the game's biggest weakness. It seems like not enough voiceover lines were recorded for each individual cast member, because a lot of lines are repeated constantly, and sometimes 2 or 3 different cast members will say the exact same line within seconds of each other. Just take a listen.
Show me what you got. Show me what you got. Show me what you got.
But at the end of the day, Jackass the Game is the title that I can recommend the most out of the 3 I've gone over in today's video. Not only did it capture the spirit of the property it was based on, but the gameplay is relatively fun, the graphics are decent enough, and you get a lot of replay value out of it. And unlike the cash grab that was Pimp My Ride, Jackass the Game was only $30 at launch. And as far as I'm concerned, getting to see a virtual Chris Pontius twerking his ass off is worth the price of admission alone.